Whoa, what is that? You trying to board with a robot leg, sir? The TSA agent's voice wasn't loud by airport standards, but it carried, sharp, amused, and a little too eager to draw attention. A few people in the line turned their heads. Frank Delaney paused, not because he was confused, not because he was ashamed, but because he had heard that tone before, in boot camp, in bars, and in offices where people thought they understood what service looked like, but didn't. The woman gestured with her chin toward his leg. Seriously, that thing belongs in a sci-fi movie. He looked down. The prosthetic brace gleamed slightly under the edge of his khakis. Metal support rods, titanium joints, polished clamps. Practical, not pretty. Not designed for subtlety, just for walking without falling. It's service issued, he said, his voice steady. After an IED in Afghanistan. She raised an eyebrow. Uh-huh, sure. Well, it's setting off all kinds of alarms. Secondary screening for you, my friend. Let's make sure you're not hiding missiles in that thing. Frank, 74, a veteran of 2 deployments and a quiet life afterward, didn't respond. He just moved forward when instructed. But the line behind him buzzed with quiet murmurs. The agent, her name tag said Mason, leaned toward a younger colleague. Looks like he's part cyborg. Wonder if he transforms mid-flight. Her coworker didn't laugh, just looked embarrassed. Frank heard it. Of course he did. He heard it all. Before we continue, where are you watching from today? This story means more when I know who's listening. I read every comment, really. At the private screening area, Agent Mason kept the tone going. She clapped her gloves on dramatically. Okay, Frank, if that is your real name, let's take a look at the Terminator leg. Frank lifted his pant leg slightly. He wasn't ashamed of it. He was ashamed of this, being treated like an object or worse, a threat. Agent Mason knelt slightly to inspect the device, her movements sloppy, almost performative. So how's this work? Plug into a wall at night? Do you get Wi-Fi? Another agent, older, more composed, glanced over. That's enough, Mason. But Mason just grinned, just trying to lighten the mood. You never know what people are hiding under all that hardware. Frank's eyes stayed on a point just past her head, a sign hanging over the boarding gates, arrivals, departures, simple words. He knew what both meant. He was headed to his grandson's wedding. He hadn't planned on arriving this way, in pain, in silence, under fluorescent lights, treated like a joke wrapped in metal, but still he didn't speak. There are moments when silence is louder than any protest, and Frank Delaney had mastered that kind of silence. Frank sat on the edge of the cold inspection bench, his hands resting on his thighs. One flesh, one steel. The room was quiet except for the buzz of overhead lights and the occasional rustle of rubber gloves. Agent Mason pulled a metal detector wand from its holster like it was a weapon. All right, Robo Frank, let's see what kind of fun we're dealing with today. The name stung more than he expected. He'd heard worse, sure, but not here. Not while just trying to fly to see his family. Can you bend this thing? She asked, tapping the metal joint at his knee with the back of the wand. Or is it all stiff and mechanical like in those movies? He didn't answer. She clicked her tongue. Silent type. Must be nice to skip the TSA line if you're half machine. The other agent in the room, a man maybe in his 50s with a calm demeanor, gave her a sharp look but said nothing. Frank caught it. He appreciated it, even if it didn't change anything. The wand beeped predictably when it passed over the brace. Mason exaggerated a gasp. Oh no, beep means bomb, right? Guess we better get the swabs. Frank looked at her just once. Long enough for her smile to falter. Then he looked away. She opened the swab kit and started testing the metal surface, muttering to herself. Let's just hope this thing doesn't grow legs and walk off on its own. He focused on the corner of the room. A framed sign read, Travel with Dignity. We thank you for your patience. He wondered who approved that wording. His fingers curled around the edge of the bench. Not in anger, in restraint. A kind of control they didn't teach you in boot camp, the kind you learned only after years of being underestimated. When she finished the swabbing, she waved toward his carry-on. Let's see what you're smuggling in here. Hope it's not a mini drone army. She unzipped the bag. Inside were socks, two neatly folded shirts, a picture frame wrapped in cloth, and a worn wedding invitation with a gold-embossed edge. He had carried it carefully, just in case they asked why an old man with a limp was rushing across the country. She held it up and read aloud. "Joshua Delaney and Emily Torres request the honor of your presence." Her voice trailed off. He didn't look at her. She set the invitation down and zipped the bag shut more quietly than before. "All right," she said, but it lacked the edge now. "You can put your shoe back on." He did so without a word. His hands moved slowly, not from age, but from exhaustion, the kind that settles in when you're made to feel like a problem instead of a person. As he stood, Mason moved toward the door. "You're clear," she said, but she didn't say it like she had won anything, and Frank didn't move like he had lost. Frank stepped out of the secondary screening room with slow, careful steps. His real knee ached. It always did after sitting too long. But now, more than the pain, there was a heaviness in his chest that didn't come from bone or metal. The crowd near the checkpoint had moved forward, most people already gone, but a few remained. One older woman fumbling with a bag too large for her frame, another passenger arguing quietly with a kiosk screen. He turned toward the benches lining the wall and sat briefly, adjusting the brace's strap under his pant leg. Across from him, the older woman dropped her purse. Its contents spilled everywhere. Travel tissues, receipts, a small oxygen monitor, and a bottle of pills that rolled several feet away. Nobody moved. Frank stood slowly, walked over, and crouched, not easily, to gather the items. The pills first, then her keys. She looked embarrassed. "Oh, sir, you don't have to." "It's all right, ma'am," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "I've got it." He knelt lower, ignoring the pain in his hip and the sound of the brace clicking under pressure. The bottle rolled beneath a stanchion. He retrieved it. By the time he handed her everything, her eyes were glassy. "Thank you," she whispered. "People don't usually stop." He smiled faintly, nodded once, and returned to the bench. A boy, maybe 8 or 9, sat beside his mother across the aisle. He had a tablet in his lap and had been watching Frank. Now, he leaned over to his mom and whispered something. The woman looked at Frank, then back at her son. The boy stood, hesitated, and approached. "Excuse me," he said. Frank turned. "My uncle has one too." The boy pointed to Frank's leg. "He says it makes him brave, not broken." Frank blinked. "Your uncle's right." The boy smiled, then ran back to his seat. It was a small moment. Just one of those things that barely registers in the noise of an airport. But for Frank, it changed the air around him. He stood again and began walking slowly toward his gate. The corridor was long, lined with muted carpet and glass windows looking out over the tarmac. Outside, the engines of a jet whined as it taxied past. Everything felt distant, but steady. As he walked, a flight attendant passed by in the opposite direction. She glanced at him, then did a double take, not at his leg, but at his face. Recognition? No, something else. She nodded, just slightly, respectfully. He didn't know it yet, but someone had spoken. Back at the checkpoint, Agent Mason was finishing her shift, sipping from a paper cup, scrolling her phone. She didn't notice when a supervisor stepped into view, clipboard in hand, asking quietly who had handled passenger Frank Delaney's screening. At the same moment, the flight attendant approached the captain at gate 14. "David," she said, "I think you need to hear something about a passenger we almost lost today." Frank arrived at the gate moments later. He handed over his boarding pass to the agent with calm hands. "Mr. Delaney," the woman said, her voice a little softer than usual. "Please wait here for a moment. The captain would like to speak with you." He tilted his head, slightly puzzled, but didn't protest. He stood by the window, watching the sky grow lighter over the runway, unaware that his silence, his simple, unspoken decency, had already begun to ripple outward. The gate agent straightened slightly as Captain David Thorne approached. He wasn't rushing, but there was purpose in every step. In his mid-40s, with a strong jaw and the kind of posture that spoke of years in uniform, Thorne wore the navy blue jacket of a commercial pilot and the presence of someone used to command. "Mr. Delaney?" he asked. Frank turned, caught slightly off guard. I'm Captain Thorne. I've been informed of what happened to you during security screening. Frank's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but caution. I'm fine, he said. Just here to catch a flight. The captain nodded. I know, and we're going to make sure that flight honors the man boarding it. Frank didn't answer. Thorne turned to the gate agent. Can you notify TSA supervision? I'll be needing a word with Agent Mason. The woman blinked. Yes, sir. Of course. Frank watched the exchange, a little stunned by the sudden formality. Then Thorne turned back to him. Mind walking with me a moment? Frank followed him down the short hallway past the jet bridge entrance. When they reached the terminal corner, Thorne stopped and turned to face him squarely. I served too, he said. Different branch, but I know the signs. And I know what it costs to walk the way you do now. Frank stayed quiet. She mocked something sacred. Thorne continued. That brace? It's not just steel, it's a story. A timeline of pain and duty and choices most people wouldn't dare to face. Frank's throat tightened slightly, but he said nothing. Captain Thorne looked him in the eye. I'm filing a formal complaint, not just about what she said, but how she said it, and who she said it in front of. You were publicly humiliated, and that matters. Frank shifted his weight, the brace clicking softly. I didn't come here to cause a scene, he said. You didn't, Thorne replied. She did, and I'm not letting it stand. A moment later, Agent Mason approached, flanked by a senior TSA supervisor. Her smirk was gone. Her posture was different, less amused, more unsure. Thorne faced her directly. Agent Mason, this is Mr. Frank Delaney. He is a veteran of the United States Navy. The comments you made about his prosthetic brace were unacceptable. You will apologize. Mason glanced at the supervisor, then at Frank. I didn't mean to offend. You didn't offend, Thorne cut in. You degraded. You disrespected a man whose body carries the cost of this country's decisions. That brace is service-issued after an IED in Afghanistan, and you mocked it like a toy. The hallway went silent. Even nearby passengers seemed to pause. Mason finally spoke. I'm sorry, Mr. Delaney. It was forced. Thin. Frank simply nodded. Thorne turned to the supervisor. I expect disciplinary action. And I suggest revisiting your department's sensitivity protocols for passengers with medical equipment. No one should have to tolerate a power trip in place of professionalism. The supervisor nodded, eyes low. Then Thorne turned back to Frank. I checked the manifest. You're seated in 28C, middle seat. Frank smirked, just a little. We have an opening in first class. It's yours. And before you say no, I'm the pilot, and this one's not a favor. It's a correction. Frank tried to speak, but couldn't, so he didn't. Thorne extended a hand. May I walk you to the gate, sir? Frank took it. As they walked side by side, the hallway seemed to grow quieter, not out of obligation, but out of respect. And for the first time that day, Frank didn't feel like a problem to be managed. He felt seen. The jet bridge was quiet. Captain Thorne walked just behind Frank as they approached the aircraft. Flight attendants stood at attention near the cabin door. One of them offered a warm smile, her hands folded in front of her. Mr. Delaney, she said. Welcome aboard. Frank nodded and stepped into the plane. The cool interior lighting, the low murmur of settling passengers. It all felt different now. Less mechanical, more human. Row 1A stood open. A window seat, wide, quiet. He eased into it, his leg brace making a soft metallic sound as he adjusted his position. A flight attendant leaned in gently, offering a small bottle of water and a cloth pouch. A few extra items for comfort, she said. Inside were socks, a sleep mask, and a folded card. He opened it. It wasn't a note from the airline, just a typed message. Thank you for the scars you carry so others don't have to. It's a crew of Flight 162. He stared at the card for a moment. Then he folded it again, slowly, and placed it in his shirt pocket. Across the aisle, a child stared at him. The same boy from earlier. He was sitting with his mother. She whispered something, and the boy stood up carefully. He walked over, holding a pack of airplane cookies in both hands. For you, the boy said, smiling shyly. My uncle says people with leg things like yours are heroes. Frank looked at him, at the offering, at the open sincerity in the boy's face. He didn't say, thank you. He didn't say anything. He took the cookies with both hands, nodded once, and offered the boy a small, worn coin from his wallet. A Navy Challenge coin, dulled at the edges, warm from his pocket. "Give this to your uncle," he said. The boy's eyes lit up. He turned and ran back to his seat, waving the coin. Frank sat back and looked out the window. The ramp workers moved slowly across the tarmac. The sun was rising over Gate 14. For once, it felt like it was rising for him. Behind him, passengers boarded in silence, some casting glances his way. Not out of pity, not out of curiosity, out of something quieter, something closer to respect. He closed his eyes for a moment, then the intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your pilot, Captain Thorne. Today's flight is headed to Salt Lake City. But before we begin our departure, I'd like to thank a particular guest on board, a man whose quiet strength reminds us what real service looks like." There was no applause, just stillness, and that meant more. As the plane pulled back from the gate, Frank rested his head gently against the window. The hum of the engines rose, steady and familiar. He could feel the weight of everything he carried, the brace, the memories, the pain, but also something else, the unmistakable lift of dignity restored, the kind that doesn't demand attention, just space to breathe. If this story moved you, type respect in the comments. Your voice matters, and I read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, here's your quiet reminder. Thank you for being here. Because sometimes the best upgrades aren't about seats or perks. They're about being seen for who you really are, even when it takes a little metal and a lot of silence to get there.